Please welcome just an amazing discovery here in Texas for me, Irvin Williams of Dynamo Amplifiers.
Hello, my name's Irvin Williams. I'm from Lake Dallas, Texas, with Dynamo Amplification here. I got into building amps about 2009 or so. Funny thing was I was actually working a job I couldn't stand, and I was trying to figure out a way to get out of it. I was making too much money, had too good benefits, and I hated the job. So I was like, I'm gonna build some speaker cabs or something like that. And I started playing around with speaker cabs, and then I decided, you know, I want to build a really awesome amp. And so I went to some of the big builders like Soldano and Bogner, Mako, a couple other ones, trying to see if they could design me something. And then they gave me some crazy numbers, and I was like, you know what? So I cracked open the amp that I had at the time, and I was like, wow, this is easy. I can do this myself. So let me give you a little backstory. So I used to be in a band called Versatile. We did progressive metal. We're out of San Antonio, Texas. Put together this band. We did 2 albums. I got the band put into all the major magazines. We got all the radio stations. We almost did a tour. The band broke up over the tour, believe it or not. And when we were in the studio, we were recording some guitar tracks. And we were having some issues with the cabinets, trying to get a sound. So our engineer, his name is John Viwick, out of Austin, he was like, I'll be right back. He goes to his truck. He comes back with his beat up 112 cab with a ported EV speaker. It's like 200, 300 watt rating. I'm thinking, what are you gonna do with that? Just trust me. He puts it on the ground. He takes our 100 watt head. We plug it into it, and it's all right, play. We play, and it was the biggest sound I had ever heard. I was like, oh my God, what is this? He explained to me. So I started looking into it. And so come to find out, this was a common thing that was available. So I went out and bought some Mesa Boogie cabinets that were made like that with the same kind of speaker. And we actually started playing gigs with these things. And we would, instead of hauling our big speakers around, we would just haul just the little small cab. And my friends were like, hey, well, let's just bring the small ones. I don't want to haul those. All right, we did shows with them, and they sounded great. So I wanted to take that concept, make it bigger, so it'll be better for the stage as far as as far as covering more coverage. And so I wanted a 212 version. So this is pretty much it. 212 with 300 watt EV speakers. And so to be able to push those speakers the same I pushed to one speaker, I needed something with more power. Therefore, I went and say, hey, can you design me a 200 watt amp? So these are 200 watts. And like I said, I tell people they're not made to be louder. They're made to drive these speakers, which can handle 300 watts each. And it drives them to a level to where it's very loud, but it does fill the whole room. It does sound good in the studio. So that was the concept originally that started it out. So pretty much I started building amps. I started researching how to make them better. Looking at every component, every single thing, the resistors, the capacitors, Weiss Fender and Bogner and Soldano and all these using certain components versus others. And I try to find things that are out that they're not doing, because come to find out, there's a lot of other components out there that companies don't use because they cost too much or because they're not the trend. You know, you read the specs on one brand and they use blah, 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 and so everybody wants to use blah, 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 blah. So I started looking into other things, going, well, what makes this sound better and stuff like that, and that's what I ended up doing. I started putting together circuits using these components that I like. Some capacitors may have a better lush tone or may sound warmer, sound colder, sound different things, and I started playing with all these different things, trying to find the one that makes it work. Another thing I did different was in designing my amplifiers, I started using toroidal transformers, which a lot of companies don't use because either they cost too much or they're not known for the tube amp market. But you go to any club in America, you'll see power amps running all the PAs. They're all using toroidals. So I contacted a company who started making, I had them make me some transformers. They're supposed to be the best transformers in the world, and they're awesome. But when I had them design them for me for what I want to do with it, they said, well, it's gonna be a little hot believe it or not, these things were so hot you could fry an egg on them. I had other issues with them, so I said, all right, so let me try doing toroidals. So I started playing with toroidals, and then I went, had my first toroidal design, and then I started potting them myself, starting off. And these things were so cold, they were so efficient, they sounded beautiful. I was like, wow. So now I have pretty much toroidals in all of my amps. I still have a few out there, and I do like one-offs. You may find one that doesn't have it in there because it's just a one-off. But everything now is pretty much toroidals. What else did I start doing differently? Like I said, I took every aspect of everything. Tubes. Everybody uses EL34s, 6L6s. Why? I like different stuff. So start looking at KT77s, which people use now. And KT77s sound like EL34, but sound like a 6L6 blend together. Same thing with KT66s, same thing. It's a 6L6 type tube, sounds like a EL34 kind of a growl. Play around with that. For my power on this one, I started using KT90s. I was one of the first ones to use KT90s. They just came out. They had been around like, a long time ago, but then they brought them back. I actually met Mike Matthews from Electroharmonic. We actually had a good conversation about it because he was surprised I was using them and using so many. But anyway, the KT90s, believe it or not, they have the same power of like a KT88, but they have the sound of an EL34. So I use those. It gives me the power I need. It gives me the tone I'm looking for, which is more of the EL34 sound. This amp here, I designed is pretty much based on that amp, but I wanted to get more of the high watt, more of the Marshall tones out of it. So I switched it up. I used 6 KT77s in this one. It gives me more of those classic tones, stuff I'm looking for, but I still have the same kind of drive I get with that one. So that's pretty much how I got into them. And then from there, I just started learning, progressing, building combos. I built a 212 amp that's similar to the speaker of this, but it's a different kind of amp. Also went to solid state. So solid state, back in the days, we used to have those hybrid Marshall valve state type amps. They sounded pretty good. They had a single tube preamp. What I ended up doing is I said, I'm gonna take the exact same preamp out of this, build it in the front end of it, all tube, and then find a way to make a solid state power amp that sounds like a tube amp. And that's pretty much what that does. I call it the flight rig because it's lighter. It's lighter than all of these, of course. It's still kind of heavy for what it does, but you can take it, put it in a rack case and drop it, throw it on a plane or carry it, throw it in your trunk, whatever, not having to haul around, these heavier heads and worrying about the tubes falling out, being bounced around or whatever, which they can do, stuff like that. And then also I have a smaller combo. I did a 20 watt. So yeah, if you met me 10 years ago, you would say I was a high power king, but no, I have a 20 watt, 66 amps. I have 50 watts, I have 200 watts, then I have 100 watts solid state. And now I'm getting into bass amps pretty soon. I'm working right now, diligently designing several bass amps for my line, and I'm going to be all out Dynamo bass. That's the biggest thing going this year for me. That's been my focus. That's why I don't have anything really new to show. This amp right here is actually from last year. This amp hit during the week of the shutdown for the COVID-19. It was in Guitar World magazine and Premier Guitar. I was yay, 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 and then all of a sudden, womp, womp, womp. Everything's closed down. I couldn't even get shipments in. I had buyers. I was trying to hurry up and get all the parts in and get them so I could ship them out. And but it gave me time to sit at home and kind of play with Facebook and do some projects and stuff to show how I build them, whatever else. That was kind of fun. But pretty much that's how I got into amps. Like I said, and then with me having a music background, being a guitarist, and being like a perfectionist when it comes to my tone, I was able to use that to kind of tweak what I'm looking for, what I'm looking to sound. And then a lot of people hear them, they're like, wow. Another thing that I'm known for is using different speakers. So I got the EVs in these. I started off using Fane speakers, which are actually in these. And now, right now, I'm really hot for Neos. I love Neo speakers. I love the fact that they're light, they're cool, they're neat, And now they're making them to where they sound like everything else. Instead of having that kind of a neo sound, they more have the traditional sound, but just in a lighter package. That's my new thing I'm working with right now. And then the high power stuff, like I said, I'm still doing these. I'll still make them for you. But I'm making all the normal wattages that are out there for whatever you need them for. So that's pretty much it as far as how I got into this. Now, when I first got into it, I'll tell you a story. So I had already been out looking at cabinet shops, trying to find a cabinet shop to build me the cabinets I wanted to build. And I remember calling a friend at work, and I was like, you know what? I can't find anybody to build these cabinets for what I want, and they're charging me too much or whatever else. I says, I want to do it myself. I asked him to find me a saw. My friend was like, well, is that all you need? I was like, yeah. He said, come by my house, pick up my saw. I have a saw. So he gave it to me, and I started cutting this cab. This is the actual cab I built, first one. I kept it. I take this to NAMM shows. It looks dirty. It's been worn. It's been used. It's been loved, and I will never sell it. But I started building that cab, and I had actually built a shell like this with wood front. This was metal, but the original one had wood. And I remember talking to my wife about buying the components to build it. I think I had already done the chassis. The chassis were made. I had paid for the chassis to have them done. And I originally made like 10 the first run. And I was telling my friend, same guy actually, I says, man, my wife won't let me spend any money. I'm trying to buy these components or whatever. I'm almost tempted to sell my amp. He was like, well, why don't you sell your amp? And I'll tell you, I had a Bogner amp. I had the first one in Texas. The serial number was 13. There was no way in hell I was getting rid of that amp. And he was like, well, the amp you're going to build, is it going to be better than the one you got? I says, well, in theory, it's just going to be better. Well, you should probably sell it and use the money to build your other amps, and you'll have number one. I mean, I thought about it for a second, and I go, you know what, it makes a lot of sense. So I went ahead and sold it, and actually took that money and started building this amp, and then also another amp. I ordered all the components, started building and putting them together. And after about 2 years of tweaking to where I had it to where I wanted it to be, I released them. And believe it or not, all the rock stars I've ever loved and wanted to meet or hang out with, all of a sudden my best friends. And one of them's here today, actually. He was a guy who, band out in high school I idolized, and all the kids were like, we want to be that, you want to be that, you know. And I said, well, I must be doing something right, because these guys are really loving it, they're digging it, and it sounds good to them, sounds good to me. It must be. And when we go to the shows, people will, you know, what's Dynamo about? Oh, high power, blah, blah, I'm into the 30 watt. I don't really like the high power, high gain stuff. And then they'll sit down and play it, and then they'll sit there and they're like, they'll keep playing it, and they'll keep playing it and playing it. It's like, people start lining up going, I want to try it next. And this guy's there for like 20 minutes going, so what do you do? What is it about? What's in this? Because what's happening is they're hearing things they've never heard before because of some of the components that I put in here that a lot of manufacturers don't use. For example, I use a lot of audiophile grade components. So yeah, they're expensive. Once you put them in there, they have different properties, tonalities that make things sound brighter or warmer or lusher or have more sustain. There's lots of other little traits that they create when you put them all on a circuit. Yeah, if you just have one component itself, it ain't gonna do anything. And if you take that one component and compare it to another one that costs 95 cents, yeah, they're almost the same. But when you have a whole circuit built with them, and they're pretty expensive, and you hear all those combined together, it really makes a difference. It's kind of like cooking. So pretty much everybody can make cookies, right? Cookies is a common recipe, but you put the right ingredients there and you use the right sugar, the right chocolate chips, you'll have the best cookies you've ever tasted. And that's pretty much my philosophy on doing these. And then the aesthetics, I'll tell you a little secret. At the time I started building these, I was high into Porsche Cayenne GTS. When I test drove one, I really was in the process of getting one. And that's kind of what influenced the style of this amp. It kind of looks like the front grill of a Porsche Cayenne GTS. And the GTS, I've always loved that name because it stands for Grand Tour Series, and these were made for touring, so therefore Grand Tour Series. That's where that came from. For more information on my amps, I have a website, dynamoamplification.com. Also, I have Facebook. I also have a Facebook fan page. Don't confuse that with my normal Facebook page. You can hit me on there. And then you can also just email me at info@dynamoamps.com. And again, my name is Irvin Williams, and I want to thank the Music Cafe and the Texas Tone Wizards for having me here, and it's been a fun time.
That's one of the things I like about this amp, is I can get my nice heavy, and I can get the harmonics that still come through, which is important to me and every other 15-year-old that's ever held a guitar with a Floyd. So, it's great, even though it's heavy. It's got a real definition.
You notice that string-to-string definition. When you hit the strings, you can hear it rings out each
exactly.
string.
In the chord, like this simple G chord, really tough. It's really good for single string stuff, and that's my pickup. This is a single coil, by the way. That's not the amp. But it's got a lot of single note definition, so I can take my muting and palm it in. And it doesn't flub out. I still have all that grit and dirt I like, but there's still clarity, so it's kind of weird.
So remember back in the day, I used to be in a bedroom jamming out to like Pantera, stuff like that. And you'd be all chunk, 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 chunk. And then when you go to do the leads, it's like beep, 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 beep.
Exactly. And on this one, you can go right from rhythm. And I played this very amp live in front of I don't know how many thousands of people. Played a couple festival shows and sort of stuff with this amp. It's my only gripe with Irvin is he won't sell me this amp. I want this amp. He won't sell it to me. It's his first amp. It's his baby. But one of these days,
he actually came to my house with a wad of cash and like,
I put $2,500 in front of his hand. He wouldn't take it.
My wife almost threw him out.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, but yeah. So back, so you get the heavy. But then, when you play just single note stuff, and it can be fast up, it can be medium, it can be. Except for my sloppy playing, but it's really defined, really clear, and I like that.
So you don't have to have like a boost or anything to boost it?
When I use this amp live, I never use a boost. Never, 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 never. I've got Wagners of every sort, Friedmans, I've got Randalls, of course I've got Marshalls and Fenders, and I all love them. They all have different things, but I usually, more often than not, have to have at least some kind of boost pedal in the front to pop that front end, to act as a buffer and stuff. And this is the one amp where I've never used a buffer. In fact, I don't want a buffer in front of this amp to, usually raise your pickup level.
So part of that's the components I put in there. Some of those high-end audiophile grade, whatever you want to call them, some of those components let those frequencies ring out. It brings out things you can't get out of the normal everyday amp parts that most amp people put in there.
Well, I'm not one of those guys that, there's a lot of guys that really like to use the volume knob. I like my volume knob all the way up or all the way down. But on this particular, you can get some. I mean, it's still super clean. It still has that. So you get that nice little, you get that little. If you need that kind of a little crunch or red dirt cowboy stuff, but then I can't stand it. I had to turn it back up. I have to turn it back up.
I also want to point out, this amp is not even turned up. This is like not even one. It's like a half, maybe. I barely have it on one, and you're getting a good tone at a very, very low volume. I could play this in an apartment if I wanted to.
Yeah.
And
but to your point earlier, when I use this, we play theaters and arenas and whatever. When I use this head, and I use these two cabinets or these two speakers, I can drive this thing louder, and it really, I mean, it sounds good now, but it really, really comes into its own once you get in some volume. Can't always do that, but when you can, I mean, that amp really shines.
And there's a lot of amps out there that sound similar, but you got to crank them to like 3 or 4 before it even starts to sound.
Sounds similar to that, really. I mean, that's got its own flavor. I mean, it's got high gain, and it's got, you know, a lot of tone, and we didn't really tweak it that much today. I don't think anything sounds like that. And the other thing is, and there's some pedal guys over here too, and other amp guys and guitar guys. You know how it is when you play through an amp and it doesn't react to your hands, and there's nothing wrong with you. You're playing this amp and that amp just doesn't react, and you don't feel it. This thing. Again, I'm playing softly, but that really reacts. I really feel that. You know, whether you play. I mean, it's just this thing makes it effortless to play. So
yeah.
So I'll let you slide today,
Okay.
because this thing sounds really good.
Appreciate it. All right, so this one's a little different since it's all tube preamp, but part of that is that with a tube amp you have what's called presence and bass control, which is part of the tube power section of the amp. This amp doesn't have that because it has a solid state power section. So to add those features, I created more like a we call it sonic enhancer type circuit that's put into this to give you that extra low end, also the extra presence control on there. So it does exactly the same thing as what the presence and depth control does on the tube version. It's just the digitally doing it, kind of like a BBE or a sonic maximizer type of circuit.
Yeah, and the same thing, you know. It feels connected to me. You know what I mean? I don't like amps where I don't feel connected, because I play on an amp and it's like, okay, I hear noise coming out of that thing, but I don't. It's like or a guitar or anything else. And
so with a lot of solid state power amps, they sound cold or just kind of like stale. This one has more of a feedback circuit, so it tries to emulate the reactance of the speaker to the amplifier. It kind of does the same thing what a tube would do, and when combining that with an all tube preamp, it kind of fills in that gap.
Yeah, if you told me that was all tube, I would believe it. Especially because that's got like that tubey mid-range.
It should, because that's all tube preamp.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see.
Has a tube.
I love it.
Has a tube effects loop in there also.
That's good for guys with effects.
Yeah, so guys using the pedals or running the
put your reverb
TC
and delay
G-Force or whatever you want to put in there. I'm old school. That's what I used to play. You can put it through there and have that extra tone.
Exactly. Well, killer. You want to try another one?
Let's try another one. There we go.
So tell me about this one.
All right, guys, so this is the Dynamo Gt6. It was actually designed to be more of the classic tone, more of the high watt Marshall British sound. I used the KT77 tubes in there. The cabinet's a classic 412 design with Fane speakers in there. And it has its own thing. It's really good for the AC/DC crunch, and it can also do other things. Honestly, when I was building this amp, I was listening to Queensryche Operation Mindcrime the whole time, and I was actually trying to catch that tone, which is pretty much a JCM 800 modified. Actually, they told me it was stock. Anyway, that was the sound I was going for with it, but with more balls to the wall. So, Scott.
That's thick, spelled with 2 C's.
what I just did was I put it into the crunch mode. So
Yeah,
now you're getting the gain on the clean channel to give you that crunchy. All right, guys, so right now we're looking at the GTSC. It's a little 20 watt combo using 6v6 power tubes, single 12. This one has the Neo speaker in there, the old, the vintage, I guess it's the V-type, what they call it now, the V-type Neo. Pretty much the reason why it's in there is because to make it light. It was to offset the weight. So like most combo amps out there, they build the circuit for a combo. They make the circuit smaller. They do a lot of things, leave out some circuits. They may substitute other things to make a small version for it to be in this kind of a platform. What I did was I took the actual circuit board that I have in my newer versions of these, and then in a normal wired chassis, you would have circuit board on one side and a power supply on the other side. What I did was I took the two and moved them in a position where they're one behind the other so it fits in this footprint, and then doubled up on all the controls. So this is a real full size, 100 watt size type circuit that's in here. And because of the weight for that, I had to offset that by using a Neo speaker. I also overbuilt the cab, so it's it's decent to carry, but with a normal speaker, it would be a little heavy. But like I said, you get all the properties of having the real circuit in there. It has more tone.
It's got a nice. Again, it's another one of those amps where you you can clean it up for a bit with having that much gain, be able to clean up that much. Just think if you had a front pickup too.
Had a humbucker in there.
If you had a humbucker.
Yeah, that's a single coil you're
using. Yeah, right. That's a lot of gain per second. So, really interesting. I like this amp, and I can see this working for cats that they want to carry their own amp, and it's not gonna break their back, and
they don't have room for it. They have a small car. Or,
and you can get a lot of gain. It'll vary. This isn't that loud.
Things have changed in the industry as far as with the COVID-19 and everything. A lot of companies have closed down. There are some parts we can't get anymore. I've been working on trying to get around that curve, finding other suppliers. I've changed some stuff. So that's another thing I've been trying to do, is just working on getting stuff to where we can get lower pricing to get them in the hands of musicians out there, Because
I think that this one's going to go home with me today, and I'm going to get some boots made to match it, and I'll be set.
Okay.
All right, buddy.
All right, man.
An amazing experience. Irvin Williams, Dynamo Amplifiers, handmade in Texas with a lot of love. Hope you enjoyed that.